When I was very young, ever since I can remember, my parents used to tell me that I was a very weak baby. I was not able to hold up my head or stand up on my own until I was 18 months old. I was born in Portugal, and once we landed here on a plane in the United States, my mom said she noticed that immediately I was able to hold up my head and began walking for the first time. My mom said it must have been a great change in the humidity and soil in the United States. Now, looking back, it seems that my whole story has been of humidity and soil. Metaphorically, humidity, it can symbolize emotional weight, discomfort, or stifling environment. Soil often symbolizes the conditions or experiences that allow someone to develop, grow, or heal. So here is some of my story. When I was young, I'd often go to many churches on my own, sometimes hopping on Sunday school buses at the corner or catching a ride with neighbors. Then at 7.5, I visited a Tendikyo church for the first time. And for the first time, my whole family went together to church. I immediately felt the sense of belonging. But soon after, my father left our family and was gone for many, many years. I remember my mother's sadness and uncertainty for our future. Still, I kept going to church. My mother never let me settle into just any religion. She would say, "When you're older and truly understand who God is, then you can decide." In 1974, when I was just 9 years old, I came to mission headquarters for the very first time. I had no idea why I jumped in the car that day. I just knew I wanted to go to the church in Los Angeles with fellow church members. I left Sacramento without my mother or brothers. Reflecting on it now, I realized that writing this speech brought me back to the beginning of my faith journey. When we arrived, I was taken to a place called the North America Church because there wasn't any room for me at mission headquarters. I was all alone in a beautiful upstairs room, decorated in traditional Japanese style, with futon beds on the floor and a giant window overlooking Los Angeles skyline at night. Being so young and naive, I didn't really know how to appreciate it. I just felt scared, homesick, and lonely. I began crying almost hysterically in silence. Later into the night, another group arrived, and a girl my age came into the room. Instantly, I felt better. It turns out that occasion was the 40th anniversary of mission headquarters. The North America Church had been prepared to house overflow guests. Now, looking back, I had no idea how special it was to be there. More surprising, it was the place where the Shimbashira was staying, which must explain why it felt so sacred and peaceful. Even before all of this, I used to say, "God be with you." I'd ask my mom to teach me how to say it in Japanese, and she taught me, "Kami-sama ga omamori shimasu." I didn't think of myself as religious. I just wanted peace and health, and I prayed for others too, always saying, "God be with you." One day, I asked the church mom, "What do people say when they pray here?" She told me, "Kei, you say Kami-sama, right? You can also say Oyagami-sama, Oya-sama, and Mitama-sama. And don't forget, you have to listen too." I began to pray with intention, focusing on the 3 shrines and serving the church with my hands, feet, and heart. The following summer, at 10 years old, I joined the Children's Pilgrimage in 1975 and assured my mother that if she sent me, I wouldn't get homesick. So she let me go. I was fine. I felt deeply happy and guided. One treasured memory was receiving my amulet, Omamori. This symbolizes that God is always with you, always protecting you, and to this day, I still wear it every single day. I loved learning so much in just one summer. I wanted to return back every children's pilgrimage that I could in the future. So then, I was able to return again when I was 13 years old. Shortly after my summer ended, it was then when my mother needed double hip replacement surgery. This was going to be serious. I remember her saying, "I won't be able to take you to church for a while. I am not sure if I will be able to walk or drive again. If the surgery works and I am not in a wheelchair, it will still take a long time to heal." I began thinking, if we could have a home shrine, I can pray for my mom and do the service from home. I asked my mom, but she said she didn't know how to take care of one. Then she said, "If you know how to take care of a shrine, then you can have one." I asked my head minister, Reverend Hasegawa, if I could have a shrine at home. He didn't respond at first, but I kept asking, promising I would take care of it and do daily services. Eventually, the shrine was installed. Every morning and every night, I performed the seated service and prayed. I think he must have known that during my mother's recovery, I needed a sacred place to pray from home. I didn't need much explanation. I just targeted my sincerity towards the mirror on the shrine. At that time, my brothers and I were facing more responsibility than ever. I felt the weight of that, but I was determined and prayed every day. With all of our hardships and struggles, I wholeheartedly built up some faith. I was the kind of person who leaned on God to get through with patience. And because of that, I believe God the Parent began to place me in situations that would reveal how strong God truly is. Stronger than me, stronger than anything I could ever face alone. God's endurance and parental care washed over me. This brings me to anecdote number 75 from the Osashizu. Quote, "If a child puts forth all his strength, the parent also must put forth strength." End quote. This is the reason of heaven. I started to witness God's strength unfolding before my eyes. As I prayed and performed the service every day, I saw something miraculous. My mother, who had struggled to walk for most of her life, began gaining strength. Within just 4 months, she was walking and even running again. It was something I had never seen. She said she hasn't ran since her childhood. That same year, she even returned to Jiba with the pilgrimage for the very first time. She was pain-free and filled with joy. She came back a yoboku. I could see she too had come to rely on God the Parent. I was amazed by her strong recovery and constant new energy. I felt I was witnessing the antidote number 75 come alive. If a child puts forth all his strength, the parent also must put forth strength. If we are all children of God, we will be shown true parental endurance. But just as I felt full of promise, everything changed. Only 1 year later, when I was 15 years old, my mother suddenly passed away from an aneurysm. I was devastated and in complete shock. Then yet, I knew she had experienced peace and joy in her final months. In a way, I felt she had been saved. I knew this path helped me through what could have been an everlasting broken heart. Somehow, I resolved my fears sooner than later. After her passing, I was placed into foster care. I had to face the painful reality of leaving my childhood home behind. I asked myself, how can I continue to do the daily service? That connection to God had become everything to me. Despite the grief, I stayed faithful. I had no relatives to rely on for help, so I had to work hard to earn people's trust. I obviously needed to mature, and I needed to learn more about salvation work. So I made a bold decision. I asked my next-door neighbors to take custody of me so I could live near my family's home and continue praying at my home shrine. My oldest brother, who was 18 years old, was still able to live in the house, but he was not old enough to be my legal guardian. Gracefully, my neighbors agreed. They took me in and even went to court to become my legal foster parents. They were my mother's best friends and members of the Church of the Nazarene. I went to church with them every Sunday with an open heart. At the same time, I continued caring for my home shrine daily and attending Tendikyo Church on second Sundays. I had to ask myself what it will take for me to truly understand God the Parent's parental love. And slowly, step by step, I'm learning that it begins with humility, with consistency, and with trust. It's important to walk this path with humility, not just for ourselves, but for the generations to come. Our children and others who will one day walk the same path need to see how we think, act, and respond to life based on the teachings. Our divine model taught us that this is possible. I always felt God the Parent and Oya-sama were with me. She showed us that we can walk this path, and by doing so, we can help guide others as well. I made a resolution to God the Parent. I needed to build a strong foundation of faith, as strong as and steady as solid rock, a foundation that would give me true stability in life, especially after having faced so many hardships in my life. I made a decision. I would give my life to God, much like Christians do before baptism. I remembered something my mother once told me, quote, "Never get baptized until you know who Jesus is, and make sure you are old enough to understand, because once you are baptized, you can never change your mind," end quote. That advice stayed with me. But when it came to becoming a member of the Tendikyo faith, the path was different. We are taught to keep an open mind and seek God the Parent's true salvation freely. I was grateful that in Tendikyo, we are encouraged to use our minds freely and trust that God sees into our innermost hearts. The mindset of world salvation and unity comes from God's care and unending perseverance for all humankind. I could see a joyous life coming from a promise like this. Tendikyo gave me that space to make a choice, a decision where the truth could take root, and where I could believe that this is God's world, where we can all become one. To have the mind of a carpenter. When I was 23 years old, Reverend Hasegawa said to me, "Kei, I want you to become a yoboku." What? I thought I was one. He explained that I would need to return to Jiba and attend 9 Beseki lectures. We laughed at ourselves, and I said yes. At that time, my son Raymond's paternal grandfather was living with us. I took care of him as he faced cancer, cataract surgery, mouth surgery, and other challenges. I prayed for him daily, and I was giving him osazuke consistently. Then I had to tell him I was an unorthodox Tendikyo person. I have been doing osazuke, and I was not a yoboku. I was embarrassed. I tried to explain to him. Then one day, to my surprise, he offered to pay for half of my airfare to go to Japan and complete the commitment of becoming a timber. I couldn't believe it. Grandpa Brown wasn't someone who entertained foolishness lightly. He was born in 1918 and deeply a wise man who believed in doing things the right way. He understood that this was something bigger than all of us, about God, and that there is always orthodox ways, a proper way to walk a sacred path. He told me, "Come back as a true timber and you can continue to pray for me." His support meant everything. With gratitude and determination, I immediately began making arrangements for the trip. Everything started falling into place. Then just 2 weeks before my departure, the unthinkable happened. I received a phone call from my long-lost father. He said he wanted to see us children again. And for 16 years, he was gone, possibly even passed away, I thought. especially since my mother had already been passed 10 years earlier. I was shocked, then overwhelmed with emotion. I cried and took a deep breath, then felt strength from within. This has to be through God's protection that I can have a reunion with my father. I told him I was still attending Tendikyo Church and that in 2 weeks I'd be going to Japan to become a yoboku. And his first words were, "Oh, Oya-sama, Miki Nakayama, she was born April 18th. Are you going to the Jiba? Or are you going to Jiba?" And I paused and asked, "You know who Oya-sama is?" He said, "Yes. I went to Jiba in 1954 when I was stationed in Japan as a GI before I even met your mother. It's a beautiful place. You should go." His words brought me peace and encouragement. At that moment, I felt a new kind of calm. My heart was full. I thought, this is why I love Tendikyo, a sign from God, the parents' protection and perfect timing. And this is why I feel it's so important to share these teachings with others, my friends, my family, even acquaintances, to know Oya-sama is ever living, always near, guiding us towards a more joyous life. It's powerful when people around you are open and close enough to share in this realization and to understand God's intention through our shared joy. Finally, the day to leave for Japan arrived. I packed up my 10-month-old son, Raymond. Before we left, I asked the Reverend Hasegawa, who was going with us, if I take my mother's little black book with me, with my uncle's phone number in Japan, would you please call her for me? He said yes. As I prepared to go, I felt the weight of the moment, not just for myself, but for my whole family. I didn't even know if my uncle knew my mother had passed away 10 years ago. This journey was more than a pilgrimage. It was a homecoming for faith, for family, and for the soul. A divine reunion. After completing half of my lectures in Jiba, we had a short break and traveled to Honjima Island. Before we left, I asked if we could call my uncle. The Reverend said we would contact him after we returned, since we were busy and still had much to do. I understood and waited patiently. After we returned back to Jiba, I focused on finishing the remaining lectures. When I finally completed all 9, I officially became a yoboku. I was scheduled to leave for America the very next day, but before I left, I made one final request. "Reverend, could you please call my uncle now?" This time he said yes. Looking back, I believe this moment was entirely God's arrangement. The Reverend dialed the number, which was in Chiba, Japan. My uncle's wife answered. The Reverend explained who he was, where we were calling from, and why. He listened, nodding repeatedly. Yes, yes, huh? Hi, 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 hi. Then he hung up the phone. I stood there, not sure of what just happened. But something happened. "Wait here," the Reverend told me. "Your aunt is calling your uncle right now. He called her from the Tendi train station just 5 minutes ago. He said he was about to catch the next train, but she's going to try to catch him in time. If she does, he'll come straight here to see you." Could this really be happening? I had just reconnected with my father 2 weeks ago, and now my uncle? In less than 20 minutes, a taxi pulled up with my uncle inside. Reverend Hasegawa had disappeared so quickly, I had to find someone to help me translate. Mrs. Masako Shimizu, a great woman, helped me. My uncle told me he had known about my mother's passing and had been worried about us 3 children ever since. I told him I had been thinking of him too and kept my mother's black book, and that our meeting without any planning had to be a blessing from God the Parent. We agreed. It was our mutual sincerity that brought us together. We both agreed And I was jumping up and down and said, "It's our sincerity." And he said, blinking his eyes, "I think it was in our bloodline." I asked him if we could go to the main sanctuary and pray together. He chuckled and said, "No, I'm sorry, I'm not Tendikyo yet. And I don't have time today. I have to catch a train soon. But next time I come, I promise, I'll go pray." Our eyes were filled with tears. He looked so much like my mother, and I looked just like his sister. We were filled with happiness and joy. He asked me why I was in Tendi. I explained I came to become a yoboku. Then I asked him, "If you're not Tendikyo, why are you in Tendi?" He smiled and told me he had been in Tendi for the past 3 days for work. He said this was the first time the company had sent him here, and said just that day he had been under the sanctuary working on water pipes. Do you see the manhole covers all over Tendi with N symbols? That is for the Nishihara Water Company. That is the company I've been working for all these years. I got goosebumps. Once again, I said, "It's our sincerity." I could hardly wait to absorb all of what was happening. After we said our goodbyes and he left, I went upstairs, heart overflowing. Just that day, after receiving the grant for salvation, a minister gave a lecture about how water flows. Underground, through the roots, nourishing crops so harvest can grow and feed us to keep us alive. In the same way, blood flows through our veins, giving life to human beings, all due to the blessings of God the Parent. And that's when it hit me. God knew I needed to feel alive, truly, fully alive. And for the first time I did. If I continue to walk this path, I will never feel lost again. I felt reborn. This was better than any baptism I had ever heard of. After years of loneliness, of homelessness, of wondering who would claim me if I died, after escaping dangers, carrying sorrow, and searching for a belonging, all I wanted was to believe in God, and at that moment I knew God saw me. I felt like God knew everything and was miles and years ahead of me, laying a path for me to follow so I could understand the truth of heaven. Indeed, a remarkable place has been revealed. God the Parent knew exactly what I needed and gave me a family again. From that moment on, I resolved to dedicate my life to the true and real God, not out of fear, but out of love. If you wish to seek the truth for yourself, then listen to these words from Oya-sama. In the divine directions we are taught, if you do not follow the path of the divine model, there is no need for a divine model. There is no path but the path of the divine model. Osashizu, November 7th, 1889. In the above divine direction, I learned that God the Parent is always watching over us, that faith planted so early in my life continues to grow. It is truly timeless. Building a foundation. Let me share with you the greatest compliment I ever received about Tendikyo. It happened during a brief but meaningful encounter with 2 Mormon missionaries. They were walking down our street, and since Brotherhood Church is at the very end, they must have noticed before they even reached it that it wasn't just a regular house. That it wasn't just a regular house. After all, we have a big sign out in front that says Tendikyo Brotherhood Church. The 2 men were dressed in white shirts and black ties, each wearing a name tag with a small lapel pin. I happened to be outside, and I sensed they might be curious about our church. So I introduced myself and asked them if they had any questions. We began to talk. After a few minutes, I felt the conversation needed to continue inside. I invited them in. Even though dinner was always at 5 p.m. at Brotherhood Church, there was always God's timing. I was able to show them our sanctuary and finish up cooking. My mother and father-in-law were home, and the missionaries joined us for dinner. Afterwards, Mom and Dad asked me to continue the conversation with the young men and prepare for our evening service at 6 p.m. I told the missionaries they can either finish their dinner after service or I'd prepare to-go boxes for them. Their eyes lit up when I invited them to stay. They asked politely if they could attend the service. I told them they were welcome, and I explained what would happen. We began with a seated service, then performed 2 hand dance songs from the Mikagura Uta scriptures, and closed with a reading from the Ofudesaki. I showed them the scripture books in case they wanted to follow along. They were so curious and respectful, and I could see something in them that had been deeply moved. Maybe it was the commitment to our daily routine, or maybe it was something from God directly. All I know is that before they left, they gave me one of the most incredible compliments I've ever heard. They said, "Tendikyo is more Christian than Christian is Christian." And I believe it. It was unforgettable. It testifies to the spirit rather than the label of faith. Always keep in mind that Tendikyo is the last tenth of God's truth. Everything else has already been taught. When we say Tenryo no Mikoto, we connect directly to the Jiba, where the origin of life flows. We can receive the truth of Jiba depending on our sincerity, so long as our hearts remain focused on one God. I love this truth revealed by God. Let us never stray from doing the service or good deeds, just as Oya-sama taught us. Revelations will surely come. Another spirited revelation at the Jiba. Almost all of you know who Jiro Morishita is. I was so blessed and honored to be called his wife. Jiro was my hero. Before his passing, we never spoke directly about his cancer being incurable. I simply asked him, "What are we going to do?" He calmly replied, "Don't worry. As soon as we can, we'll return to Jiba together." That was all the reassurance I needed. I believed him. He would fight to get well, and I believe we would go together even if I had to carry him on my back. But Jiro passed before we could even buy the tickets. I had to pick myself up by my bootstraps, lean on God once again, and fly to Jiba alone. What was supposed to be a 15-hour flight schedule turned into 41 hours due to weather delays and 5 unexpected transfers. My luggage was lost. I was exhausted and confused. Was this detour God's sign? I asked Jiro's spirit, "Please stay with me. I need you beside me more than ever." When I finally arrived in Tendi, I made my way to the sanctuary to pray. As I approached Jiba from the south side entrance, something felt different. For the first time in nearly 40 trips over 40 years, it looked empty. No one was going in, no one was coming out. I took off my shoes and began to walk up the stairs. Just then, a man wearing a white mask came out and we looked at each other. I stared a little closer and realized it was Jiro Masaki, a board member from Myodo Grand Church. I called out, "Jiro!" His tears welled up in both our eyes. We exchanged a slight bow. No words were needed. I entered the sanctuary, placed my offering, and knelt down to pray. I bowed deeply and whispered, "Thank you, God the Parent." I finally returned home. But before I could finish the word home, I began to cry. Then uncontrollably. Why? I asked myself. Because I had just shouted the name Jiro out loud, and maybe for the last time. Seeing Masaki-san had given me that moment. A sacred space to call Jiro's name one more time. I felt so grateful. Then I realized everything, the delays, the long flights, the missing bags, it had all been divine timing. God the Parent arranged everything perfectly so that Jiro's spirit could meet me at the front of the sanctuary and carry us home together. God had made it so. God always finds the most tender and powerful way to reach my heart, even when it takes a little extra for my hard head to truly understand. And that, too, is a blessing. Looking back, I see the steps God led me through every day, every tear, every prayer, and I see how it all lined up with Jiro's dream for us. We did go home together. My life is filled with stories like these, and I love hearing other people's stories too. This is what makes me love Tendikyo. We live our faith through experience, and our experiences bring us home to the heart of God. It brings me true joy, and I can feel God sharing in that joy. Oya-sama taught that if we remain singly focused on working for the salvation of others, our minds will gradually become purified without us even realizing it, and will allow us to be saved and be filled with joy and brightness. Yearning for Jiba and bringing ourselves into complete accord with God the Parent's intention will surely lead us to the day when we gain a convincing insight. Indeed, the 50-year divine model is a single path that leads to the joyous life. The innermost heart that God the Parent and Oya-sama teaches us to purify is to allow us to see our seeds begin to sprout in this lifetime. It's true that sometimes those seeds take 10, 20, or even 30 years to bloom. But whether it's at home, at work, or in times of rest, Tendikyo leads us down a remarkable path. I know my talk is long, but there is a very important story I feel compelled to share with you. I can't let this one remain buried because we must continue finding ways to reach others, to plant faith in Oya-sama. When we look at the life of Oya-sama, we see hardships beyond anything most of us could even imagine, even prison. Oya-sama embraced everyone, people from the highest mountains and those from the lowest valleys. A brother's salvation. This story is about my brother Andy. One day, the late Reverend Fumio Okazaki from SP Church and I were working on a project together. He turned to me and said, "Kay, can I ask you a very personal question that might have something to do with your brother Andy?" Then he said, "First," and I said, "Sure." Then he said, "First, let me tell you a story about a man. There was a man who once lived here in East Los Angeles and committed a very serious crime, worse than your brother ever did, I'm sure. He was running from the police and went to as many Christian and Catholic churches as he could, desperately seeking salvation. But everywhere he went, they told him they were going to call the police. So he fled to Seattle, Washington, and there by chance, or by perhaps divine guidance, he knocked on the door of a Tendikyo church for the very first time. This man wasn't just looking to hide, he wanted to be saved. He told the minister, "I plan to turn myself in, but I need to know, can I be saved?" Since it was a Honjima-affiliated church, the Reverend told him, "If you're sincere about turning yourself in and truly seeking salvation, I ask that you first return to Los Angeles. I cannot help you here, but I know a Tendikyo church in Los Angeles. Let me call and see if they can help." That Reverend called Reverend Okazaki. Reverend Okazaki continued, "I told him that if the man was truly sincere, I would give him 3 days. He could stay at our church in Boyle Heights. I would teach him the seated service for his salvation during those 3 days, but only if he promised to turn himself in afterward." The man agreed. They put him on a Greyhound bus to Los Angeles. Then Reverend Okazaki looked at me and asked, "By any chance, is your brother Andy incarcerated in Folsom Prison?" I was surprised. "Yes, but how could you know that? I haven't seen Andy in so many years because he was way up north near Oregon and just 3 weeks ago was transferred to Folsom Prison." He smiled and said, "I've been receiving letters from the man I told you about for over a year now. And in his most recent letter, he said something beautiful. Quote, 'I think I found salvation. I hear someone in the cell next to me singing the seated service.'" Reverend Okazaki paused. The only Tendikyo follower I could think of who would be doing the seated service and in prison would be your brother Andy. At that moment, I was shocked and almost couldn't breathe, emotional and grateful. I thought to myself, if Andy is doing the service, he is going to be fine, and I can stop worrying about him. He's leaning on God the Parent and Oya-sama. Even more moving, maybe Andy was helping another soul find salvation. Maybe he became an instrument for that man to believe, to trust, to sing the seated service and be saved himself. God must have brought them together for each other. And once again, I was reminded that the service truly is salvation. It works through sincere effort, even behind prison walls. From now, I hope we can continue to inspire each other to work together to strive to save others even one day sooner. Please believe that our efforts are not wasted. If we don't reach out now, if we don't act with urgency, it will only become harder to realize the joyous life world. God the Parent is waiting for us to put our full trust and faith into these teachings so that many opportunities will come our way. We have to keep cleansing our minds like we remember to take showers, but do we always remember to cleanse our minds? So let's give our all towards the remaining pre-anniversary activities towards Oya-sama's 140th anniversary. Oya-sama is waiting for us and to share in our spiritual growth. Thank you very much for your kind attention.